Althea Rivers had always been a morning person, but there was something about that particular Wednesday that made her feel more alive than usual. She woke up to the sound of birds singing outside her small apartment window, the summer sun painting patches of golden light across her bedroom floor. She stretched and let out a deep breath, feeling an odd surge of optimism course through her veins. Maybe this was a premonition. Perhaps on some level she sensed that life was about to take a complicated turn. She had no way of knowing that by the end of that day, she would be unemployed, judged for her kindness, and then catapulted into the middle of an event so startling it would leave her breathless. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. She worked at the Gilded Garden, a restaurant nestled in the heart of an upscale London neighborhood. It was the kind of place that drew in wealthy patrons, celebrities, and on occasion, members of the royal family. Althea had been there for 2 years, though she often felt like an outsider among the staff. She was proud of her heritage and never shied away from who she was, an ambitious young woman with deep ebony skin, bright eyes, and a warm, genuine smile. Despite her desire to foster good relationships, some of her co-workers were cold and distant. It wasn't difficult to sense that they saw her as different, though nobody would say it outright. She told herself she was imagining slights where there were none, but many nights she trudged home feeling isolated. She arrived that morning at the Gilded Garden in her neatly pressed uniform, a fitted black shirt with the restaurant's gold embossed logo on the pocket, and black trousers that brushed the tops of her comfortable shoes. The air held a mild chill, but she felt a tingle of excitement. As she walked through the front doors, the sweet scent of fresh pastries from the kitchen enveloped her. She clocked in, wrapped her hair in a simple bun, and did a quick mental run-through of her tasks. Her manager, Mr. Thorne, was the sort of man who wore a perpetual look of mild annoyance. He always found something to criticize. Either the wine glasses weren't polished to a sparkle, or the floral arrangements looked droopy. Althea had made it her mission to stay on his good side, no matter how difficult he made it. The first few hours of her shift passed without incident. She served cappuccinos and croissants to the early customers and chatted politely, carefully keeping her posture in that attentive, welcoming stance that made guests feel at ease. She had a knack for reading people, understanding what would make them comfortable, and anticipating what they needed before they asked. This skill, along with her radiant kindness, had garnered a loyal subset of customers who asked for her by name whenever they visited. She felt proud every time that happened, relishing small affirmations in a place where compliments were sparse. Around noon, however, whispers began to spread throughout the staff. Rumors floated that a special guest was scheduled to arrive. Althea caught snippets of conversation. It might be someone from the palace. Heard the Duchess is in town? Shh, keep your voice down. Mr. Thorne doesn't want us gossiping. Goosebumps rose on Althea's arms as excitement coursed through her. Living in London, she had grown accustomed to hearing about the royal family, but she'd never been in the same room with any of them, let alone serve them a meal. She wondered who might come in that day, half hoping it was just idle talk. High-profile visits required top-notch service, and that usually meant more stress. The afternoon lull stretched on, and for a while it seemed the rumors were just that. Rumors. Then, just after 2 o'clock, the door opened quietly, and in slipped a small entourage. Althea recognized a face she'd seen countless times in newspapers and tabloids. Kate Middleton, the Duchess of Cambridge, stepped inside with a calm grace that lit up the entire room. She was dressed elegantly but simply, wearing a pale blue dress that emphasized her polished demeanor. The hush that fell over the Gilded Garden was immediate. Even the staff behind the bar seemed to stand a little straighter, fully aware that every detail mattered when entertaining such a guest. Mr. Thorne rushed forward, a wide yet insincere grin plastered on his face. He welcomed the Duchess and her associates with an overly formal bow. He then began to walk them toward an intimate corner table surrounded by lush greenery, presumably selected to guarantee privacy. Althea stood off to the side, her heart fluttering. She felt a swirl of emotions, excitement at seeing someone of such status in person, a nervous energy that made her wonder if she'd be allowed to approach the table, and a quiet pride that she had the skills to handle this situation with grace. The moment Mr. Thorne beckoned her over, Althea's stomach did a small flip. He tried to maintain the facade of courtesy in front of the Duchess and made a grand gesture that nearly toppled a nearby vase of roses. Ignoring his slight bumbling, she stepped forward carefully, introduced herself, and assured the Duchess that she would handle every aspect of her visit with care and discretion. Kate Middleton offered her a warm smile, and that was the moment Althea fully grasped that, behind the title and public persona, she was just another person who appreciated kindness. She guided the Duchess's party through the menu and recommended a few house specialties. There was a new seasonal dish featuring roasted vegetables with a tangy sauce, and Althea described it with such genuine enthusiasm that Kate Middleton decided to try it. Throughout the meal, Althea floated back and forth with an easy grace that belied the quiver in her stomach. She made sure water glasses were filled, recommended a choice of dessert, and shared a polite laugh when the Duchess teased one of her aides for being too indecisive about dessert. Yet, all the while, Althea felt Mr. Thorne's eyes on her like a hawk. He had given her this grand responsibility, but he was undoubtedly poised to seize on any misstep. She determined to do nothing but flawless work, ignoring the gnawing sense that something might go wrong. Everything seemed to be going well, until an unexpected moment arrived just as the Duchess finished her meal. One of Kate's aides leaned in, whispering something that caused her to frown slightly. Althea noticed a slight shift in Kate's composure. Concerned, she stepped forward, softly asking if there was anything she could do to help. The Duchess smiled apologetically and admitted that she had spilled a small spot of sauce on her dress. Though it was barely noticeable, Kate was worried that any slight stain might be picked up by cameras. Althea, recalling an old trick from her grandmother, offered to help. "If you don't mind, there's a small private restroom just around the corner," she said, her voice hushed. "I can assist you in rinsing it out. We have some mild cleaning solution in the back." There was a brief second where everyone seemed to hold their breath, uncertain if it was appropriate to bring the Duchess away from the table. But Kate Middleton's warm eyes crinkled with gratitude, and she nodded. Mr. Thorne shot Althea a sharp, warning look, but she ignored it, guiding her illustrious guest to a discreet door that led to a staff-only corridor. Althea hurried into the storage room to find the cleaning solution, then proceeded to help dab the stain on Kate's dress. Through it all, they spoke softly. The Duchess laughed about how she always seemed to spill something on herself whenever she wore light-colored outfits, and Althea shared a funny story about how her own family used that same cleaning solution for all sorts of mishaps. Once the stain was nearly invisible, Kate placed a hand on Althea's shoulder and thanked her, her gratitude so sincere that Althea was momentarily flustered. In that moment, both women seemed like equals, one a high-profile royal, the other a humble waitress, bound together by a small human predicament. They returned to the dining area, where the Duchess's entourage was waiting. Mr. Thorne stood there, stiff as a board, his expression betraying concern over what might have happened. He tried to summon another forced smile and quickly ushered them out, presumably worried about paparazzi ambushes. For a short while, Althea's heart soared. She had gotten to help the Duchess personally, a once-in-a-lifetime encounter she would carry with her always. She buzzed with an almost childlike excitement, replaying every detail in her mind. Perhaps in her starstruck haze, she didn't notice Mr. Thorne's deepening scowl. She almost expected him to offer some kind of praise, but when the lunch rush ended, he demanded she follow him into his office. Confusion flickered across her face, but she complied, stepping into the cramped space. The moment the door shut, he unleashed a torrent of frustration. He berated her for taking the Duchess away from her table, for ignoring standard protocol, for using staff-only chemicals on a guest's dress. He claimed the restaurant was not a personal cleaning service and that Althea had risked a disastrous headline if the solution ruined the Duchess's outfit. She tried to reason with him, to explain that she had used the cleaning agent countless times, that it was mild and safe, that the Duchess had explicitly asked for help. But Mr. Thorne was in no mood for explanations. He grew red-faced, hurling accusations that she was trying to draw attention to herself. He insisted that what she had done was not her place and scolded her for playing the hero. Despite her attempts to remain calm, her voice trembled as she tried to defend herself. The argument escalated until Mr. Thorne, whose sense of power seemed inflated by the situation, made a scathing remark about how people like her should know better than to step out of line. The words stung. Althea froze, her mind swirling with shock and anger. Those 3 words and the venom behind them made it clear that any illusions of fairness were shattered. She stood there, blinking back tears, trying to maintain her composure as her manager's tirade continued. Finally, with an air of self-righteousness, he told her to pack her things and leave immediately. The rest was a blur. Althea found herself standing outside the gilded garden, clutching a small box of her personal belongings. The sun had shifted, and the day was slipping into an early evening glow, but her world felt darkened. She wanted to call someone, to vent, to cry. She leaned against a nearby lamppost, her breath coming in shallow gasps, tears threatening to spill down her cheeks. Fired for helping Kate Middleton. The absurdity of it hit her like a punch to the gut. She spent the night tossing and turning in her small apartment, replaying the entire sequence. The shame, the anger, the heartbreak formed an impenetrable swirl of emotions that rendered her sleepless. When dawn broke the next day, she forced herself out of bed. She needed to look for new work. She couldn't afford to stay jobless for long. Even though her shoulders drooped with humiliation, she reminded herself that she did nothing wrong. Over and over, she repeated that it was an unjust situation. As she prepared a cup of tea, she scrolled through her phone, planning to search for openings at other restaurants. But suddenly, her phone buzzed with message alerts, more than she was used to seeing so early. Confused, she tapped on the first one, which came from a friend. It read, "Are you serious? This is huge. You okay?" Another message from her cousin said, "Girl, you're trending on Twitter." Her heart hammered as she opened social media to find a flurry of mentions tagging her name. A short video was circulating, recorded by a diner who must have discreetly caught the moment Kate Middleton thanked Althea on the way out. Over the short clip was a caption that told a brief but powerful story, the kind waitress who had gone above and beyond for a royal guest. The caption ended with a shocking update that she had been fired for it. The video had gone viral overnight, igniting a storm of support for her. She scrolled through the comments, tears gathering in her eyes as strangers from around the world rallied around her. Some demanded to know the name of the restaurant that fired her, while others offered her new job opportunities on the spot. Hashtags like #JusticeForAlthea and #SupportTheWaitress were popping up all over Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. She felt a tingle of disbelief. Her shock deepened when she noticed there were news outlets reaching out to her, requesting an interview. This was the last thing she had expected. She had gone to bed certain that she was facing an uphill battle alone. Now, it felt like she had an entire global community behind her. Sure, not everyone was kind. There were a few trolls blaming her for crossing a line, but they were drowned out by the avalanche of praise and empathy. Her phone rang, and she saw it was an unfamiliar number. She hesitated before picking up, half expecting it to be a journalist. Instead, a calm, refined voice asked, "Is this Althea Rivers?" She confirmed, her hands shaking. "I'm Charlotte, Kate Middleton's aide," the voice continued. "The Duchess would like to speak with you if you have a moment." Althea's heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear her own words of agreement. The line clicked over, and suddenly she found herself speaking directly to the Duchess of Cambridge. The sound of Kate's gentle voice saying her name made her knees weaken. She braced herself against her kitchen counter, too stunned to do anything else. Kate apologized profusely for the way Althea had been treated, expressing shock and dismay at the news of her firing. She said she had learned about the situation just that morning and insisted she would do whatever was in her power to help rectify this injustice. Althea listened, tears silently rolling down her cheeks as the Duchess thanked her once again for her kindness. The phone call lasted only a few minutes, but those were minutes that would change Althea's life forever. When the call ended, Althea cradled her phone, feeling as though she were caught in a wonderful yet terrifying dream. In a matter of hours, more phone calls poured in. Media outlets begged for her story. Activists reached out wanting to provide legal assistance, just in case she chose to pursue wrongful termination. Her best friend Simone called to scream with excitement, telling her she was in all the tabloids. That morning talk shows were featuring her clip, and that the Gilded Garden was being dragged across social media. Althea's shock intensified when she opened an email from a reputable talent agency. They wanted to help represent her interests, to navigate the press swirling around her name. The entire world seemed to have exploded with interest in her life. She barely managed to eat breakfast as her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Mr. Thorne made a statement, claiming that Althea had acted without permission, endangering the restaurant's reputation. But that statement was drowned out by the voices of support for Althea, including several longtime customers who publicly defended her impeccable service and kindness. Some mentioned they would never set foot in the Gilded Garden again unless the restaurant apologized and rehired her. The backlash was immediate and fierce. People outside the restaurant brandished signs saying, "Boycott Gilded Garden." Althea was amazed at the lengths strangers went to champion her cause. She was just a waitress who had lent a helping hand, and she felt a heady mixture of gratitude and disbelief that her small act of compassion had resonated so widely. By noon, she was fielding calls from lawyers offering to represent her in a possible discrimination case. Each conversation seemed more surreal than the last. She confessed to Simone during a rare, quiet moment, "I'm not sure if I can handle all this. One day, I'm a nobody. The next day, I'm famous for being kind. It's overwhelming." Simone laughed gently, telling her she deserved every bit of support and that she shouldn't diminish the significance of what she'd done. Althea knew she was right, but humility had always been her go-to perspective. It felt odd stepping into the spotlight for something she believed any decent person would do. Late that afternoon, another call came in, from a well-known public relations consultant named Carmen Lee. Carmen had worked with charities and public figures in crisis management, and she offered her services pro bono. She advised Althea to maintain her authenticity, cautioning her not to let the sudden fame consume her. They discussed some essential talking points Althea could use if she chose to speak to the media, focusing on the importance of compassion in service industries and the insidious nature of discrimination. When they finished, Althea felt more confident. The swirl of events was dizzying, but perhaps she could channel this energy into something positive. She also received a message from a local philanthropic organization that had heard about her story. They were impressed by her kindness under pressure and wanted her to speak at an upcoming event about empathy and equal treatment in the workplace. The invitation left her breathless. She had never done any public speaking beyond the occasional toast at family gatherings. Yet here she was, being asked to stand at a podium and share her experience, to shed light on the forms of bias many still faced. She looked around her tiny living room cluttered with half-unpacked boxes of old books and felt the weight of the moment settle over her. Something big was happening, and she was at the center of it. Another emotional roller coaster arrived when a letter turned up outside her door in the afternoon. Inside was a handwritten apology from Mr. Thorne, short and abrupt, explaining that he had been under immense stress and had made a rash decision. He expressed regret for his harsh words. Still, the letter read more like a reluctant attempt to minimize backlash than a genuine apology. He offered her job back, but under conditions that she remain in a lower position, and that she follow protocol to the letter. The implied subtext was that she keep her head down and not become a public figure. The bitterness in his words was unmistakable, even as he tried to mask it under remorse. Althea set the letter aside. She knew there was no way she could return to that environment. Too much had been said and done, and she no longer had any faith that she would be treated fairly. As the day wore on, the flood of messages continued. High-profile chefs offered her positions. Journalists requested exclusive interviews, and kind-hearted people reached out with donations. A local business owner even offered to help pay Althea's bills until she found stable work. Her phone buzzed non-stop. Twitter and Instagram notifications piled up. She was touched to see that many supporters were referencing not only her act of kindness to the Duchess, but also her perseverance in the face of subtle racism. The words "I stand with Althea" became a rallying cry in numerous posts. That evening, Althea sat on her couch, the exhaustion of the day catching up with her. Her phone rang once more. It was Charlotte again, Kate Middleton's aide, politely inquiring if Althea would accept an invitation to a private gathering where the Duchess wished to show her appreciation. Heart pounding, she agreed, unsure of what to expect. Charlotte mentioned it was a small event for a charitable organization dedicated to community outreach in London's underprivileged neighborhoods. Althea was stunned. "The Duchess feels your story would resonate with the guests," Charlotte explained. "She believes your perspective would bring a unique and heartfelt angle on empathy and equality." After the call, Althea found herself staring at her reflection in the mirror, tears slipping down her face. The last 24 hours had been the most transformative of her life. She had been fired from a job she'd worked hard to keep, simply because she dared to show kindness and solve a problem for someone who happened to be royalty. The fallout was massive, but in the midst of the chaos, she discovered an outpouring of support that made her feel less alone than she ever had at the Gilded Garden. People she had never met stood beside her, championing her cause. That in itself was a shocking revelation. She thought back to the moment in Mr. Thorne's office. She recalled the indignation etched into his every word, and the vile phrase, "people like you." It had pierced her heart, reminding her that no matter how hard she tried to prove her worth, some people would see her only through the lens of prejudice. But now, here she was, receiving a personal invitation from the Duchess of Cambridge, someone who looked past her uniform, her job title, her skin color, and saw the beautiful heart that many had missed. In that realization, the sting of Mr. Thorne's words began to melt away, replaced by a sense of purpose and possibility. When she finally crawled into bed, she found it impossible to sleep again, but for an entirely different reason. Adrenaline coursed through her. She reflected on how a single day could change the trajectory of a life. The world beyond her bedroom window seemed both vast and welcoming. Now she had a platform, albeit one that still felt surreal, to speak about the kindness and equality she believed in. She was no celebrity, but maybe her story could nudge one or two people to examine their assumptions, to stand up against discrimination, or to offer a hand to someone in need. The following day, a package arrived at her door. Inside, she found a beautifully tailored dress with a small note, "A little something to wear for the event. Sincerely, Kate." Her breath caught in her throat. The garment was sleek, made of a soft navy blue fabric that shimmered under the light. It reminded her of the color the Duchess had worn at the Gilded Garden. Althea's eyes brimmed with tears as she held the dress against herself. The kindness behind the gesture was overwhelming, and she was humbled by the realization that the Duchess, despite her busy schedule and lofty position, had taken the time to select something special for her. The evening of the private gathering arrived. Althea dressed carefully, smoothing out the navy blue fabric and checking her reflection in the mirror. She hardly recognized herself standing tall and poised. Simone met her at her apartment and gave her a tight hug, whispering words of encouragement. They took a car arranged by Charlotte, which delivered them to a stately hall in central London. Althea stepped out onto a red carpet she hadn't expected, a flutter of nerves gripping her stomach. Photographers snapped pictures, and she felt her heart race. She kept telling herself, "Breathe, stay calm, be grateful." Inside, the atmosphere was refined yet inviting. Warm lighting illuminated the hall, and elegantly dressed attendees mingled over glasses of champagne. Althea recognized a few faces from television, including celebrities who often championed philanthropic causes. A wave of uncertainty washed over her. She felt out of place among these individuals. Then she spotted the Duchess of Cambridge, radiant in a flowing evening gown, engaged in conversation with an older gentleman. Kate looked up, saw Althea, and her entire face lit up. She excused herself and walked over, offering a handshake and a quick embrace. The two spoke briefly, and Kate introduced her to several organizers. She praised Althea's genuine compassion, calling it the perfect example of humanity in everyday settings. Althea's cheeks warmed with embarrassment at the attention, but she couldn't deny the sense of pride blossoming in her chest. As the evening wore on, she spoke to donors and activists about her experiences, emphasizing the importance of recognizing the dignity of every human being, regardless of their role or appearance. Strangely, what had once been a humiliating termination now seemed like a stepping stone to something far more profound. Before the night ended, Kate pulled Althea aside for a quieter conversation. She once again expressed how sorry she was that Althea had lost her job. Althea assured her that everything had turned out okay, that in fact she'd never felt more appreciated and seen. The Duchess then hinted that she had a few ideas in mind to help Althea's future career. While she didn't reveal specifics, she suggested that opportunities were waiting if Althea wanted them. Althea, astonished, could only nod and thank her. When Althea returned home that night, she found herself pacing her apartment, too exhilarated to sleep. She realized that she had experienced a complete turnaround in a span of 48 hours. Fired one day for showing empathy, She'd now been embraced by thousands of supporters, personally contacted by the Duchess, and invited to a high-profile event. The avalanche of adversity had unexpectedly opened doors she never would have seen otherwise. She felt a sense of awe at how quickly life could shift, how acts of hate or prejudice could be met, and sometimes overcome, by a forceful wave of communal kindness. In the coming weeks, job offers flooded in. One high-end restaurant offered her a position as a floor manager, citing her proven track record of excellent customer service. A charity recommended she become a spokesperson, traveling to schools to speak about career development and overcoming obstacles. Unsure of where to turn, she sought advice from Carmen Lee, the public relations consultant. Carmen encouraged her to take her time and find what truly spoke to her soul. Meanwhile, the Gilded Garden was left dealing with its ruined reputation. Rumor had it that Mr. Thorne faced disciplinary action from the restaurant's owners, who were furious at his mishandling of the situation and the subsequent public relations nightmare. Eventually, Althea decided to accept a managerial position at a new boutique eatery that prided itself on inclusive hiring and community outreach. Part of her contract allowed her time to speak at charitable events, bridging her passion for hospitality with a newfound mission to stand up for others who felt silenced or mistreated. As weeks turned to months, her story continued to circulate, reminding people that small acts of kindness could hold unimaginable power. She'd occasionally look in the mirror and smile, remembering the day she had used a simple cleaning solution to help a royal guest, completely unaware that she was on the cusp of a life-changing journey. Though the road ahead was still uncertain in many ways, she felt a confidence glowing inside her that she had never known. Out of heartbreak and unfairness came an unexpected windfall of opportunity. Each day she woke up with renewed determination to carry forward the message that had ignited such widespread support, that no job is too menial for kindness, no person is too small to make a difference, and no boundary, royal or otherwise, should stop someone from offering help. In reflecting on that fateful day, she realized that sometimes being fired for doing the right thing was simply a doorway to a life where you could do even more good. Althea's life began to take on a rhythm she hadn't anticipated, one filled with purpose and momentum. Each day brought new opportunities and a renewed sense of agency. She embraced the roles that came her way, not for their prestige, but for their alignment with the values she had always held dear. The boutique eatery where she began working flourished, not just because of the exquisite food, but because Althea's presence radiated a warmth and energy that drew people in. Regular patrons often remarked on how the space felt genuine, and how Althea's story, though known by many, had only amplified her humility. Beyond her new job, Althea's speaking engagements became a cornerstone of her journey. Standing on stages before crowds of young people, struggling workers, and advocates for justice, she shared her experiences with vulnerability and strength. Each event left her more connected to the world around her. She met individuals from different walks of life who had faced discrimination or injustice in their own forms, and their stories gave her perspective and inspiration. Her rise also brought a sense of obligation, one she welcomed. She started advocating for policies supporting equitable treatment in the workplace, working with organizations to educate managers and employers on creating inclusive environments. Slowly but surely, she began to see her story evolve from a moment of pain into a powerful tool for change. What struck Althea most was how her simple act of kindness had become a ripple in the lives of others. It was no longer just her story. It was a collective reminder of humanity's capacity to lift one another higher. If you liked this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what do you think will happen to the waitress after helping Kate Middleton? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.